Well, I think we'll go ahead and just jump right into this. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Um, I'm sure, will be more people joining online as we get going. But this is just a way for us to communicate with one another, find out what worked for us, what didn't work. But in addition, to just get some really good information from the Love to Ride folks about how the challenge went, and look for opportunities. Hopefully we can do this again in the future. Keep your fingers crossed that funding comes through for that. With that, I'm just going to go ahead and turn this over to the Love to Ride folks. Who would like to jump in?
Me. Hi.
Hi, Chelsea.
Most of you probably recognize me by now, but I'm back to give you a bit of a summary of how the challenge went. In March, it was really exciting, so I'm just going to share my screen and make sure I share the right screen. Okay, should be able to see that. Okay, cool. So this is the third statewide challenge we run in Florida, but it was the first one that we'd run in March. So the previous 2 years we ran in November, kind of to celebrate Mobility Week and turn it into a month-long challenge. This was the first time we did a statewide challenge during Florida Bicycle Month. So that was kind of the new thing this year. If I could just ask everyone to go on mute, and if you've got a question, then you can just turn your mute off and speak up. And overall, as a challenge, we had higher participation compared to both of the November challenges that happened in 2020 and 2021. So it was a really good success. And we had more workplaces engage in the challenge than we have in the previous 2 years as well. So all around, more people riding and more workplaces taking part than the past 2 years. So well done to you all for engaging people in that. Got some numbers on some slides now. We can share these after, so don't feel like you need to jot it all down or take note of everything right now. But overall, we had in this top row, you can see the totals, a slightly lower number of workplaces actually registered to take part, but ultimately we ended up having more workplaces than the past 2 years participate. So the difference between registering and then actually participating is registering is kind of opting in or indicating an interest in taking part, whereas we count a workplace as having participated if they've actually had at least one rider log a ride during the challenge. So fewer registered than actually took part. So that means, about 173 workplaces indicated an interest either before or during March saying, yeah, we're going to take part, but ultimately 221 workplaces had at least one rider log a ride. So that was really exciting that even though we had fewer registrations, more workplaces actually took part than in the past. So a much higher kind of conversion rate for registering than going on to participate than we have in the past couple of years. And then there's a breakdown here for each of the districts. Some of the districts have increased registration and participation, others have increased, others have stayed the same. Overall, though, we had, as we noted, increased participation of workplaces. There are widely different results here. So you guys will know best probably potentially what has caused that to happen, if there was different outreach strategies used, if there wasn't time, if, this year for this challenge, there was a much shorter lead-in time than there has been for the November challenges. So that certainly probably played a part in some of the districts. One thing I would just like to note is that in District 7, this is their third March workplace challenge. So in Tampa Bay, they've been running a workplace challenge in March for the past 3 years. And you can kind of tell what the results they've got, that they've had just increased participation every year because it's a kind of annual thing for them. So this was the first statewide version of that, but you can really see the difference that it makes to be running this year on year, as evidenced by the performance of District 7. So well done to Julie Bond and co over there. We had really similar results for individuals. So overall, we were down on registration, but ultimately increased participation. So a higher conversion rate than in the past. 83% of people who registered went on to log a ride, which is excellent. We typically see around 70%. So you guys kind of knocked it out of the park on that one. But similar results across the district. Some were up, some were down. And that will be for various reasons. Anyone have any questions about those? All right. Please stop me at any time. Yeah.
I do have, Chelsea, I do have one question.
Yeah.
In terms of being able to kind of focus in our individual areas and take a look at organizations that did register, is there an easy way to access that information?
So Courtney and Porna have access to the data. So they will be able to share a list. And I'm, volunteering Courtney to now do that, but we can send it out to you as well. Obviously Love Triad has access to that, but the people who are the administrators of the site are the ones who have access to that. And right now that's Courtney and Porna.
Thank you.
Okay. So who are the people who rode? This is kind of a bit of the characteristics of the riders who registered. So we had just over 2,000 registrants, as we saw on the last slide. 68% of those are regular riders, and those are people who are riding multiple times a week, as indicated by the survey that they did when they registered on Love to Ride. And then we had about 25% occasional riders. So those are people who are riding at least once a month, but less frequently than 3 or 4 times a week. And then the new riders are people who either haven't ridden at all in the past 12 months or have only ridden a few times. So probably, definitely, less than once a month, but potentially not never. So that's how we kind of classify our rider types. So there's definitely room to grow with getting new riders engaged. We've done a really good job of getting that kind of regular rider cohort, probably those regular cycling groups, people who are already commuting to work, and those people are kind of the loudest and most engaging advocates, which is really great that we've got so many of them on board. And now we can hope to use them to get new people riding. And that's a really good area for growth for the coming year. And then we've just got this split of age and genders, pretty even between males and females, a slightly higher percentage of males. And then you can see the age range here is skewing kind of towards mid 40s to mid 60s. But really a big spread. So we've kind of engaged a bit of everyone, which is really great to see. So in terms of the kind of community that we've created on this site, it's been really active. People have been high-fiving each other. During the challenge, there's over 8,000 high fives given on photos, on activity, on stories that people posted. There was over 100 encouragers that were credited, and 263 people were encouraged to join the challenge. Lots of people were setting goals, and those goals could be for the month or year-long goals, and people can use that feature year-round. So I encourage you to keep using it and encourage people to keep using that, because the community exists as long as the site is alive and active, and that is so far the case. So I encourage everyone to keep using the site and encouraging people that your workplaces and your networks and your areas to keep logging rides and just building up that community because it's there for you. So in terms of how far and what people rode during the challenge, we've got some really exciting information here. So we had more rides get logged this year than we did in November. So a slight increase on the number of rides. That actually converted to fewer miles being ridden, which was interesting. But then we move on to kind of see, actually, we had a big increase in the number of miles that were ridden for transportation. So we had fewer kind of recreational trips logged, which is probably why the distance was a bit shorter, because people not as many people went on those long bike rides, but more people were actually riding shorter trips for transportation to get from A to B or to get to work. And then ultimately we saved 15% more CO2 than we did in November. So it was really great to see an increase in riding for transportation this year, because that's obviously the goal here, is to get more people swapping their cars for their bikes. And we did do that in March. Any questions about that? Cool. So we just got a bit more detail here about the types of rides. So you'll see the pie chart is covering the 2022 challenge, but I've gotten parentheses to the side of each one, the 2021, the November percentages. So you can see we had 73% of rides were fun or fitness rides, which is a bit down, but then we had that increase in the rides to work, like I just mentioned. It stayed the same on riding to other destinations. So that's kind of riding to the store, riding to different errands. About the same on indoor rides, about the same on riding with kids and to meetings. So the biggest change we saw was that increase in riding to work and a slight decrease in those fun and fitness rides. We also engaged lots of different organizations this time around. So these were the first place winners in each of the size categories. And these were all actually new winners compared to November. So in November, 7 different workplaces came in first. So it was great to see a bit of competition in different workplaces, topping the leaderboards, and no one's the win every time. So we're continuing to engage different workplaces. So for me, the key successes of this challenge in March were just higher participation overall. Every time we've done this, we've increased our participation. But the great thing to see this time around was the increased number of rides for transportation. And that seems to be growing and growing. In March, we had over 500 new people join the platform and 47 new organizations join the platform, which is great to see. And overall, we had a higher conversion rate of people who registered and then also went on to log a ride. So something, it's to reflect on is what was done. How did we get more people to log those rides? What did you do differently this time around than you did in November that potentially caused that to happen? And it's something to reflect on. So we kind of just wanted to open it up for some discussion. What was your experience like promoting this challenge during Florida Bicycle Month versus November during Mobility Week or the Mobility Month? What might you do differently next time, and what worked well and lessons learned? So I'm gonna turn it back over to you guys, but I'm really looking forward to hear, what you think and how your feedback on the challenge and how you think it went.
I'll go first, I guess. So I feel kind of like it's a little bit of a working in a vacuum. I don't have a lot of good feedback in terms of organizations that are registering on site. So, after sending out emails, after contacting folks, I would say that my organization, TBARDA, the Commute Tampa Bay Commuter Services Program, I tried very hard to get some employee events off and running with organizations we had been working with. And unfortunately, in March, it didn't come to fruition. We're still working with these guys, trying to get events going for their employees. It's just, I think it's coming out of the pandemic. People are scrambling to get people back into their job positions. I don't know what the excuse is, but it's been kind of like pulling teeth to get folks back. So I think with just time, this is going to come back. It's going to come back to normal at some point. At least I hope it does. But what would I do differently? That I would have more engagement, I think, with our TMO organizations around the area. And I say this kind of delicately because a lot of them don't have staff or funding to do outreach at the moment. So it is kind of a tricky situation with our local TMOs. But I think what really seems to work well, you guys put together such a beautiful package in terms of contacting folks. It's it just needs that extra oomph on our part to engage the employer, those organizations. And I'm hoping that we have staff here eventually that can help engage with employers and keep that alive. This is really an important component to maintaining engagement with employers, with organizations. So, I'm hoping that you continue to get funding on this. That would be really huge. I'll turn this over to the next person. Anybody else want to jump in?
Well, Ken, actually, I want to just address something that you're saying, because this is a conversation that we've been having over the last, I don't know, 8 months or so inside of Love to Ride. And that is, one, how to help you folks and the TMOs conduct outreach to employers without overwhelming them with additional responsibilities, and also just overwhelming them in general. So just know internally, things that we've done is actually we've hired internal CEMs who will be working on our markets going forward. So we'll have additional resources to help you and folks like you, the CAPs in addition, as well as other TMOs and the districts themselves, conduct outreach to businesses on your behalf. So just know that that's coming.
Thank you. Pat, you want to jump in?
Oh, actually, I was debating whether to, because I was going to echo what you just said. It just seems like it was a lot harder in this spring season. There were a lot of other things that were taking, priorities and just spreading us really thin. And, basically it's me and then a few hours of a couple other people's time during the week. So, between that and trying to restart our employer outreach and rebuild our van pool database and all of that, I felt like I just didn't have the bandwidth to give it what I would have liked to. In the fall, we're dedicated to Mobility Week. That's all that's on my book. And so I can give more of a push then. But it was just bad timing for us as far as resources go.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from some of you other folks out there. So speak up, Juliana.
Yeah, okay, so I work at the University of South Florida Center of Urban Transportation Research with Julie Bond. So I basically was trying to engage organizations. So I sent them emails, I sent them the promotion stuff. I even try to go visit some employers, try to get them ready for the challenge. I was trying to, just trying to give them what they would need to get the stuff started and to encourage their employees to join the challenge and log rides. So I would try to welcome people, trying to high five them, engage them, make sure they encourage people, just keeping up with that kind of stuff. But in the end, nobody really, no matter how much I try to engage people, either in person or online, it was just, I didn't get too much engagement back about what, if this worked for them, or if they used it, or if anything actually happened, or if they reached their employers or not.
Well, I'll say your numbers reflect that increased engagement. I mean, your numbers this time around look really good. And I know, there's a couple of things that are happening there, right? Like it's the length of time that we've been in the market, because that does create that critical mass. But I was looking at the numbers earlier and I was like, kudos, because those numbers looked really strong. So the work that you did do did have an impact. I believe at least the numbers reflect that. But still, you felt kind of similarly that it was hard to get people's attention. Is that kind of it?
Only because when I reached out to them, I didn't really hear anything back when I was asking if things was going good, sending photos, or if there's anything you need. It was just kind of depending on the organization, which was kind of many of them, nobody really responded back.
Got it.
It's not just you, Juliana. That's kind of how it goes. You just keep soldiering forward. And like Laura said, I thought the Tampa stats kind of spoke for themselves, that people were still doing it and looked good.
Thank you.
Just a shout out to Juliana and their team. We actually interacted with you guys, and you were amazing in terms of what you were able to bring to the employer. When you did engage somebody, you really, that's the kind of thing that I hope that we can do, because it was really engaging, and that hand holding that you did. I think that's really key to making that work. So like Courtney said, soldier on. That's really important. Don't get down on it. What you guys were doing was amazing.
Yeah, this is Derek Dixon from District 2. I noticed that our engagement went down and it was kind of hard to push that month. What I would do differently probably is reach out to our consultants. We have a new one that just came on board. And also I'll probably be reaching out to different businesses. That's what I would do differently.
I'll pipe up if you guys can hear me okay. One of the new elements for the March challenge was that opt-in for people to like, please sign me up with my local commuter assistance program. That was great. But the next step part of it of just like, oh, there needs to be a plan. And so initially the plan was just put them all directly in the database, but then Chelsea, we had chatted a little briefly about, better understanding where those leads are and what part of the state. So it's just sort of like, okay, the follow through part ahead of time would have, on my part, just been helpful to have a moment to do that. But in the juggling of mini balls, it's unsurprising maybe that it was an oversight, but something to correct in the future. And then I think it's been one of those days where the internet's trying to destroy me. So I missed a bit of the conversation, but I heard Pat mentioning Mobility Week, and that's a better time. I actually liked the March time because there is so much going on in Mobility Week that when is it not crazy? It's always a little much and spread thin. And at least to just talk about one mode during March was easier. None of this is easy, but just another side of that.
One thing that I would note too is, we're coming up with our budget right now. And if we could coordinate Love to Ride's campaign with our own budget in terms of getting the word out there, I think that would be really helpful. We can just, kind of carve out a little box in our budget for marketing. I know that you guys are under the gun in terms of getting funding for Love to Ride, but if there's a way that we can better coordinate, and if we do decide to stick to March, or if we decided to stick to November, or even if we did both, it would be helpful if we could kind of carve that out so that we're building on the promotional effort that is already there. And then, it might even involve getting stuff into the newspaper, getting stuff into radio ads, what have you, if we can come up with that kind of money. But I would just mention that.
I would just say yes. Yeah,
More
for
the better.
sure.
Anybody else who'd like to share with us what their experience was? Well, it looks like we're kind of quiet right now, which is cool. Just listening in, I think, is positive. Was there anything else that the folks from Love to Ride would like to share?
From our standpoint, obviously, the longer in the market, the better, and the more engagement you get, and the more engagement across the board, including businesses, individuals, et cetera, right, becomes part of the fabric of the community, much in the same way that it has in Tampa. as you've seen, as evidenced by the percentage increase of participation there. I think, a couple of things. One, we've added this new tool, the Insights dashboard, which we think will be very helpful at the statewide level. We'll carve up the state as we have in the past at the district level, so we'll be able to see all of these, all of the stats, general biking stats. But in addition to that, we're also working on an Insights dashboard that will actually be behavior change, and we'll actually be able to see individual riders' migration over time from a new rider status, for example, to an occasional rider status. You'll be able to map that and see that happen over time. One of the things I wanted to point out in one of the slides that Chelsea shared was on the percentages of the rider types on the platform right now, that 7% number of new riders. What it doesn't, that story that isn't captured there that will be captured soon is those occasional riders, a percentage of those were new riders initially and have migrated to occasional, right? So when you look at the overall effect of the program within our community or within the community and the state, those occasional riders again represent, some of those represent new riders that have migrated, or where the behavior change is proof point that they're riding occasionally now, not just once in a blue moon.
Yeah, and we're sending out those post-challenge surveys this week. So all the people who signed up for the challenge, whether they actually rode or not, will get a version of a survey asking them what kind of effect the challenge had on their riding and their intention to ride. We've got a couple extra questions in there that will hopefully be helpful data for you guys as well. So some of that Laura also just mentioned of tracking kind of who's moved from, being a new rider to now riding more frequently, will also be reflected when we get the results from that survey that we're sending out, and then put it together with the kind of baseline survey that people fill out when they create their Love to Ride profiles. So in the final report that we deliver to you guys, we will have more of that picture to share. We just don't have it yet. And just on the note of the survey, it gets emailed out to everyone individually. So remind people later this week to be looking out for that in their inboxes. There's not just a link you can share to it because it's individual. So just remind people the survey's going out, keep an eye out on their inboxes for it, because we want to get as many responses to that as possible to get the best results possible for the final report.
All right. Anything else anybody else would like to share?
I just wanted to say thank you to Courtney for taking the lead on the March challenge, and Ken for putting today's call together, and Chelsea and Laura as always helping out.
All right. Well, let's give people back the rest of the half hour remaining. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Love to Ride team. This is wonderful. And thank you to everybody who attended today. I look forward to doing this again in the future.